Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brian Harriot, and Brian is the founder of Choosy Consultant. So interesting concept, and excited to have him share a little bit more with us today, about Choosy Consultant, and also just his own story of how he, transitioned into business ownership and is now helping other people do the same. So with that, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wes. I'm glad to be here.
So we were just chatting before we figured out that you lived in New Orleans for a while and I lived in Baton Rouge for a while. So we were swapping some Louisiana stories, but now I believe you're based in California. Is that correct?
That's right. My family and I live in California. We live in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we have figured out a scenario where we can go back and we spend our summers at our lakeside cabin in northern Wisconsin.
So that sounds like a pretty good setup, and it sounds like you've got the timing right. Better to spend summer in Wisconsin instead of winter in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly right. And about every 6 years, we take a trip back in the winter to see if we can do it. And every time we say never again, and then 6 years later we do it again.
Yeah, well, I can see that. Just you want to go back and make sure that you're not missing out on anything in the winter in Wisconsin. So, your consulting business, I assume, is a big part of why you're able to spend part of the year in Wisconsin, part of the year in California. So, tell us a little bit more. Specifically what is Choosy Consultant, and then we'll dive more into that. But I also, just from the little bit you shared with me about your backstory and how you kind of transition, I want to make sure the audience gets to hear some of that as well. But, what is Choosy Consultant and how did it kind of come about?
Sure. So just to begin with the end in mind, Choosy Consultant, I'm a financial coach. I'm a financial coach for individuals who are successful professionals, typically in corporate, but have reached a stage in their middle career where they start to believe that there's more to life than just their corporate job and want to step out and find more time freedom, financial freedom, and those sorts of things. So how did I get there? I took the path, essentially. So I started, I'm an engineer by training. I went immediately into consulting with Anderson Consulting, turned into Accenture. Mm-hmm. I've done I was a staff consultant for most of my life, and traced that exact path, did what I was supposed to do, invested in my 401k, saved money along the way, but then had, I don't know if it was because I turned 40 or just it happened to be around the time I was 40, had that moment of, what am I doing here? I know, do I really have 20 plus more years of this ahead of me? Something kind of needs to change. Actually, this is something that when I work with my clients, you kind of know something's up, but sometimes you need that kind of kick in the pants or that life punch to the gut is what I call it, to kind of get you over the edge. Mine happened to be the story of Marissa Mayer. She was she was 37 at the time and named CEO of Yahoo. This was back around, I was exactly the same age. She and I both grew up in Wisconsin. I didn't know her, but that could have been my life. And I thought, wow, she's the CEO of Yahoo, and I'm just some director at, this typical corporate job. I just, that was the first time I realized, that I kind of hadn't made it. And I started to question more of why I'm doing what I'm doing instead of what I'm doing. And so that was the point at which I decided to go out on my own. So that was my first step into entrepreneurship, is as an independent consultant. And what I've
Okay.
realized, since, is that that's a very easy way to kind of migrate from typical corporate profession. And so what that then has allowed me to do is, make more money, control my time, control where I'm working from, and all those sorts of things. So that was at 40. And it really just took me 7 years after that. So at 47 is when I became financially free in terms of what I call it, which means, do I still need to work? Of course I do. Do I like working? Yes. But do I need to work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks out of the year? I don't. And so the life that I've been able to create for myself now is to be able to, work during the school year because I've got a young son. What else am I going to be doing? And then
Yeah.
spend that summer 100% free and enjoying myself. I was able to achieve this. It's been about a year and a half now. And I just love the concept so much. And whenever I would leave to go for the summer or come back, everyone just kept asking, how did you do this? And so that's what led to the financial coaching perspective, or the financial
Mm.
coaching business, which is really this concept of tying financial analysis of kind of your personal financial situation with how do you want to spend your time? And it's that kind of unique perspective that allows you to then take that next jump to living this more free life. And that's why I love the path to freedom concept.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And I think, I think your story resonates. I know it resonates with me. I think it resonates with most people. And, as my area of focus is franchise ownership. And I kind of advise people as they're, considering franchise ownership, trying to figure out, where to get started, what types of franchises should I be looking at? How do I go research these franchises? How do I pull together funding? I help them navigate that whole process. And, the vast majority of the people that I work with that are considering something like franchise ownership, they're wrestling with the exact same thing that you just described, right? Where they're 15, 20, 25 plus years into some sort of a corporate track that they put themselves on. And, usually it's been good to them, right? They've made pretty good money. They've, got money invested in 401ks and, in non-retirement stocks and things like that, maybe even some real estate, but, they're still grinding, right? They're still reporting to someone else. They don't have that control of their time. And at some point it just hits them and they're like, do I really, like you said, have it in me to do this for another 10, 15, 20 years? And I think you're exactly right. There's, for everyone, some sort of a moment or a life event that when it happens, it really causes you to step back and to reassess. For my wife and I, it was having our first kid, and she was in pharmaceutical sales. And I mean, we were younger than I think a lot of people, set themselves down this path. And I think that was for no other reason than I'd fallen backwards into the franchise world a few years out of college, and we were already starting to kick around some ideas of, maybe we should look at business ownership. And, then having a kid, we didn't want to put our kid in daycare full time. And so again, life kind of kicked us in the pants, and my wife's company laid off 50% of the sales force while she was out on maternity leave. And now she didn't have a job to go back to, right? Even though she was out on maternity leave. Scary at the time. Best thing that could have happened to us looking back, because it gave us a little space to really assess. And again, because I had been working in franchising for a while, was familiar with it, and we were able to get our own thing going. But it's not going to be the necessary path for everyone, right? And I think my consulting business with Path to Freedom is pretty similar to what you talk about, with an easy way for a lot of people to take that first step into business ownership is go be a consultant with whatever industry you're familiar with, right? In my case, it's franchising, right? And, I worked for franchisors. We've bought and sold franchises. We still own a franchise today. So I'm pretty well positioned to help someone that's doesn't have that same experience, but wants to consider owning a franchise, help them navigate that process. So that's really, I think, what you mean with Choosy Consultant, right? And finding easier ways to start making that transition, because it's a scary prospect, whether you want to make a change or not. It's a scary prospect to walk away from a salary, the benefits, and just the security, or at least the perceived security that a corporate job can give. We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scary factor, which I completely agree with. And I think there's a couple things. Is one is you don't know like what you do, and you need to figure that out. And that's where consulting is the nice thing. That the challenge that I had to get over, I was always taught as I was reading about this stuff, like you never want to trade time for money. Don't trade time for money, because you want passive income. But that's still money. You have to invest all that time up front and then hope that it works later. Consulting, though, is a way I think you can find the best of both, because the choosy part is I want to work with who I want to work for, when I want to work, right? And from where. And so you can still trade time for money if you have to. But because your work is project based, you can then kind of have start and end dates to it. And so you can kind of strategically, place those periods of work in your life and then take off in the other times. I think, and then just one other comment about being financially ready. This was also something, a hurdle that I see people need to get over, especially when they're coming from the traditional corporate sense. And that is, it is sold and it works, but it's not the only method, that you need to build this huge mountain of savings to become retired, or financially free. And that's a long path, right? That's a long, you have to save for a long time to build this mountain of savings. And so I don't remember the exact time I learned it, but when I had this realization that, they talk about the 4% rule. So, that's how much you can live off each year based on your based on your savings. Well, that's just an extra step to get to that amount that you need each year. So really, it's not the mountain of savings you're looking at, but it's this river of cash flow, right? You want to keep the money flowing. So you don't have to get to the big savings mountain to have the cash. You can do it in a different way. And so so I have this model called the time freedom equation, which is how much do you need to survive each year? Right. That's your lifestyle expenses. That's on one side of the equal sign, right? And that's what you need to make up. And then on the other side, you have two variables you can play with. One is your investment income. So if you have gone through half of your career and you have some saved up, well, guess what? You can take some of that money and live off that money, even if it means, maybe it's in a taxable account and you can get access to it. But perhaps it's even in a retirement account. Sometimes it actually pays to take the 10% penalty if it allows you the freedom that you want, right? So you've got some money that you can take there. And then the difference is what you need to make. And that's actually that was revolutionary to me and to many of my clients, because you realize that the number isn't so bad. So just in round numbers, let's say, and these are different for everybody. If you need $200,000 to live on, I live in California, and you can live off $100,000 of investment income. You only need to really come up with $100,000 after that, and add some in for bonus and whatnot. But then you start to think, could I do consulting or contracting or a part-time job or own a franchise and make $100,000 a year? Sure, I could. And the thing
Absolutely.
is, that's the minimum. You're probably going to blow that away, but at least gets you over the hump of saying like, I can't do this. I need to work full time and save $5 million because that's what Susie Orman tells me I need to do.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you brought this up because it makes all the sense in the world to me that, when you sit down with your clients and put pen to paper and really do an analysis of like, all right, where are you and what do you need annually to live the type of lifestyle that you want to live? I'm not shocked to hear that it's less or it's more achievable in the short term than most people think. Because I think, we all sometimes we're so close to it, we're so in it, and then you think about the future and yeah, if it's, I need to get to the point where I've got 5, 8, $10 million in a retirement account, that just seems so far off. And people just kind of shut down and they don't really take it much further than that. And there's also, I've heard different numbers, but I think there's been a lot of research done around, like once you get to a certain level of income, like your lifestyle doesn't really go up that much more, if any, with more money. And as an extreme example, like if you're worth 500 million, like you can pretty much have access to everything you do at a billion, right? Like, unless it's just,
No,
you
no.
actually need that B in billion to get access to stuff. Like, materially speaking, you can go get whatever with 500 million that you could with a billion. And I think I've heard numbers of like, 300 to 500,000 for most people seems to kind of be that threshold that, if you can get to that point, you're not going to really be much happier by going to 1 million or 2 million a year in income. And so I think, again, this is going to be different for everyone, and everyone's goals and interests and desires are different. And, if you want to go, make sure that you're making a couple $1,000,000 a year and it's worth the time and effort to you to do that, great, go do it. But I think what a lot of people realize if they step back is that not only do they not need to make as much per year as they think they do to really live the type of lifestyle that they want, but that also it's more attainable. Because I know for me, for a long time, I was just so caught up in the grind of like, I want to make as much money as possible and I'll do anything I need to, legally to get there. Then we started having kids, right? And it's like, no, I value my time. Like I want a good balance. Yes, I still want to make good money and I want to make sure our family has a great lifestyle, but I would rather make a little bit less and do that in a enjoyable way than work 50, 60 hours a week and never be with my kids and never get to enjoy any of the nice things that we have because of all of that hard work. So I imagine that's an incredibly valuable exercise for you to take your clients through, to give them some clarity and see that, yeah, there's actually a pretty attainable pathway here if you really want to go and make this happen.
Yeah. And the thing I always worry about too is it's not as though you're doing this to just kick back, you go from the successful grind to having control of your time. And I mean, there's some of that initially you're like, whew, I need to take a break. But I'll tell you from experience, like that first summer I took off, by the end, I was like kind of itching to do something again, because I think we're creatures of, we want to contribute,
Yes.
but now I can just do what I would like to do, which is really amazing. Here's a kind of a model I'm playing around with, see how this resonates with you. But like, I feel like the journey through life is, imagine like 4 squares on like this would be a really bad hopscotch pattern, but 4 in a row. And you've got like your skills first, right? Like this is, you're in your 20s and whatnot, you're building your skills and you got to do that, right? You have to have something that you can contribute. You can't skip that step. But then people spend all the time making money, right? So that's a square that probably like stretches out for a long time.
Yep.
Then you leap, and finally, when you become financially free in the traditional model, then you have time. And then you can like sit back and go, okay, how do I want to make an impact? Because I actually want to live a remarkable life. I want to do something great. And then at the end, you have your 4th square, which is impact. I think the key here that I've uncovered is that time square. It's like so far out in the traditional path. What we need to do is take that time square and drop it right next, like right on top of the money one, the
Yeah.
financial one. So
Yeah.
you've got to do your skills. Then you do a nice jump to both time and money freedom and like work them together. And that's what going out on your own can offer if you do it right.
Yeah.
Right. Now you have the time to think, okay, now I want to make an impact. What is it that like people jump to like, work, make a big impact. But I'm like, if you don't have time to think about it, like, how can you even get there? Like, you need to have that like time and money step first before you do impact,
Yeah, it's so true. If you don't have the time or the money, like you just don't have the mental space to really figure out how you want to make that impact. At least for a lot of people, right? Like,
and if, yeah,
some people may have had, a personal thing that impacted them, right? Like, mother died of cancer at a young age, so they know that they want to make an impact through, cancer research or whatever.
yeah.
But I think the majority of people, you need that time and space to really figure out what it is you're interested and passionate about, and how you want to make that impact. And I mean, I couldn't agree more that the traditional model of, hey, go to college, get a degree, get a job,
Get a good
work
job.
for
Yeah.
40 years or 50 years, and then step back and reap all the benefits of all of that hard work. I mean, I've got it right here, The 4-Hour Work Week, Tim
Oh
Ferriss.
yeah.
When I read that
Classic.
book, I was, maybe a couple years out of college, and I was telling you before we started recording, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car in their management trainee program. So that was my first kind of corporate gig. And Enterprise it doesn't sound glamorous, right? Nobody grows up wanting to go rent cars, but it's like most big corporations. If you can keep working your way up the ladder, I mean, they have some extremely high paid executives that work for that company, extremely. And you don't have to, get to the upper echelons to be making really good money with a company like that. But you have to stick with it, and you have to not be one of the one that they filter out through, the 60, 70-hour work weeks that you're working as a management trainee and, assistant manager and things like that. So I was bought in, man. The first couple years that I was working for Enterprise, I was drinking that green Kool-Aid, and I was a company guy, and I wanted to just keep climbing that ladder. And it wasn't just, reading a book like 4-Hour Work Week, but like looking back on it, it's really interesting how people were brought into my life, books were brought into my life, just my mind was opened up to all of these other potential avenues, right? And it all kind of happened, around the same time, and events kind of fell into place in a certain way that before you knew it, like, I couldn't sleep at night because I was so ready to get out of working for a big company and figure out a different way. But I think it was really at some point coming to that realization that, like, I don't want to just work my life away dreaming about finally being able to retire one day. And like, I remember in 4-Hour Work Week examples he would give of, people that spent their entire lives working so they could go join a country club and play golf every day. And then 2 months into it, they're like, I fucking hate golf. This sucks. And I was like, I don't want that to be me. And to your point from earlier, it's not trying to dodge working hard. I think most people, especially if you're, a high performance type of mindset, like, you're going to be miserable after too long of not creating or producing or contributing. This is just more about doing it on your own terms and being smart about it. Hey everyone, we'll be right back to the episode, but one quick note, success doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if you'd like to learn more, you want to go deeper and interact with like-minded people, I'd love to have you join the free Path to Freedom Facebook group. You can join by going to pathtofreedom.com/group and become a part of the Path to Freedom community. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah. I completely completely agree. And I think, I mean, the time that you spent at Enterprise was still, I'm sure, certainly valuable in the
Invaluable.
skills that you developed. Exactly.
Invaluable.
And that's the important piece of the puzzle, I think, is like to not skip over that part. Because
Hmm.
for me, my, I mean, I wanted to contribute. And so I stopped my consulting degree. This is why did I move to New Orleans back in the early 2000s, was because I wasn't, I already wasn't happy in my corporate job, and I decided to do Teach for America, right?
Oh,
And teach
cool.
in the New Orleans public schools. And I felt great about it, but I couldn't make any money.
Yeah.
And
No.
all of a sudden, like that really, I couldn't make an impact anymore because like we had to just survive. And so like,
Yeah.
I kind of skipped over a lot of the skill development so that I had something worth, of value. Like if I just did it too soon, right? It was a
Yeah.
lesson learned. And so these are the things where like everything kind of plays together. And, I like the fact that I was even thinking about that at the time, but it
Oh,
just didn't
yeah.
work right with the
Absolutely.
money piece. That's why like it involves like the money, the skill, the entrepreneurial endeavor, whatever it happens to be. They all have to kind of work together. Yeah, they have to work together, and it's achievable sooner than you think. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. The building the skill set, and I think also just like the drive and the determination, like because I did enterprise for I think like 3.5 years, and made my way up into like lower level management roles where I had my own branch to oversee. You're still not making a ton of money. You're still working crazy hours, and it's a pretty high stress type of gig, but to your point, the lessons I learned, I mean, I learned how to hire people. I learned how to fire people. I learned how to manage. I learned how
Hmm.
to read a P&L. Most of my compensation was based off of the profitability of my branch. Like, you're going to go and start building businesses and consulting, like that's invaluable experience. But even after that, I didn't know franchising was going to be the path for me. I fell backwards into it. And then I still, had lower level, not great paying jobs for years as I learned. And then I got into selling franchises for brands. So, with commission, you could make more, but it was all of that helped me develop the skill sets to, number one, realize that franchise ownership could be a viable pathway for my wife and I when she got laid off. And then because transition for us to transition to be fully out on our own was still scary, especially with a young family. So when we started our first franchise, I still had a W-2 job selling
Hmm.
franchises, right? So salary, commission, benefits, and year and a half into us starting our franchise that my wife was kind of driving, we had enough income and it was consistent enough and kind of predictable enough that we're going to make at least a certain amount of money each month that I could then branch out and start my own consulting business. And so that developing the skill set is critical, because I think it's, especially in this day and age, right, where whether it's YouTube or social media or whatever, it's entrepreneurship. I mean, everyone's preaching entrepreneurship. I think it's probably very tempting for a lot of younger people to want to jump the skill development phase and go
Yeah.
right to I'm a founder, I'm a CEO, I'm making all this money. And it can be, people have done it, right? But it's probably not going to be achievable for everyone if you don't really have that foundation.
And yeah, and I mean, you got to reward the opportunity, like take the opportunity, go for it.
Yeah,
But that's
yeah,
just one half of the puzzle. I think what you touched on with that transition for your family, right? Where, one of you still had W-2 and the other, you basically you've got like a kind of a fallback option or a defensive position in there. And this was
yep,
explained to me once, I forget where I read it, but if you look at like the teams that win championships, it's because they have a good offense and a good defense. Maybe not the
yeah,
best of both, but
yeah,
they're up
right.
there in both because you need both. And that's exactly what you did, and is a very nice way to to move. And the other thing people tend to worry about too is like, this is something my dad taught me, is if you make a decision, and it doesn't work out, just make a different decision, make another decision. In other words, if you leave your corporate position and you're a good person, you're not going to be burning bridges and a bunch of stuff, like you move on to try something new. If it doesn't work, you could probably always go back, if you
Yeah.
had to. But that's your defensive position. Like, what's your fallback position if something happened, if something
One,
were to happen?
yeah, that's such a good point, because we're wired to resist change, right? And we want to
Mm-hmm.
stay in our comfort zones. And so, anytime you're facing a scary decision like leaving a job and starting your own business of any sort, your mind's just going to come up with all of these worst case scenarios. And going back to Tim Ferriss, like I heard a TED talk that he did many years ago where he explains this exercise called fear setting. That's what he calls it, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but the short gist of it is, he's like, so take the decision of leaving a job to start a consulting business. If that's on the table and you're terrified, right, and your mind is conjured up all of these scenarios of what could go wrong, before just accepting that those scenarios are realistic and saying, all right, that's too risky, I'm not going to do it, go through this exercise, write down the absolute worst case things that could happen, right? Then start writing down things that you could proactively do to prevent those worst case scenarios from happening. All right. And then write down what you would need to do to get yourself back to where you are today, even if those worst case scenarios arose. And in most instances, you realize that a lot of these worst case scenarios are highly, highly unlikely. There's many,
Yep.
many things that you can do, right, to hedge against those worst case scenarios. And even if it doesn't really work out, it's not that difficult to get back to square one or to where you are today. And, that's not going to apply in every situation, but that's always stuck with me. I've done that exercise numerous times. I've shared it with many people that I've worked with that were, experiencing the what I call FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt of, starting a
Yep.
franchise business. And I think it's just helpful sometimes to step back and try to look at some of this fear and determine, is it even practical or not, or is it just wildly unrealistic?
Yeah, and he also talks about the Tim Ferriss, the stoic way of thinking, and
Yeah,
there was the benefit of having hardship in your life. And the one that I
absolutely.
always think about is, if I lost this house and our cabin and I had to go back and get a small apartment like I had in college, could I do it? Sure. Sure, I could do it.
Yeah.
Would I like it? No. And I have so many more skills and network and all that stuff now that I could kind of quickly move out of it. But if that's the worst thing that could happen, that's not that bad,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. It's tough when you're in it though, and you're trying to make that decision. And so,
Yeah.
I assume this is, a big part of where you're able to add value to your clients, right? Is, giving them a starting point, giving them, good practical advice on how to figure out, if they want to transition out of a corporate job, what does that need to look like from an income standpoint and a time input standpoint? But also, I imagine just some of this kind of practical coaching, right? Because I would venture to guess you've never
Yeah.
had a single client that didn't have their own version of what I call an oh shit moment at one point or another, as they're on the prefaces of getting ready to leave a corporate job and set up their own shop. So I'm really interested. I'd love, whatever you're comfortable sharing, about kind of the process that you take your clients through, because you're
Oh, sure.
really set up as kind of like I mean, how would you describe it? Is it a course? Is it one-on-one coaching, group coaching? Are
Oh yeah.
there all of the above options?
Yeah, so I sell myself as a completely independent, right? So I'm a financial coach. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to sell products or anything.
Right.
And I have the entrepreneurial background. So I've actually started 3 companies in my life. So it's this kind of 360-degree financial coaching to help you make a transition in your life. And the way that I structure it, because it is so individualized and customized to a person's situation, I will work with a client over a 2-week period initially. It's usually
Okay.
like 6 or so meetings to kind of figure out what you want, get everything situated, put the financial plan together and the entrepreneurial plan together over that 2-week period. And then 12 months of kind of monthly calls in a group setting to make sure that you're kind of continuing on in your plan. So I believe that the people that I'm working with they're successful people. They just want to make a switch. So time is of the essence, and time is tough to find. So that's why we're like, maybe take 2 weeks off work if you have to, but figure out a way to invest this kind of bolus of time with me. 2 weeks,
Yeah.
boom, we'll get you everything you need to do in your plan, the numbers, the motivational aspects of it, everything. And then let's meet for the year monthly after that. And probably learn from the other people that I'm working with as well. So, and then selfishly, how does that fit into what I'm selling? Well, I know that, so I need to do a monthly call once a month. That's fine. But then I can place people in these 2-week blocks. But if I don't want them in July and August, then I just don't put them in that block. So I've kind of found this way to practice what I preach, I guess.
Yeah, 100%, which I think is important, right? I'm a big believer if you're advising
Yeah.
anyone on a topic like, how to transition out of being a corporate employee to whether it's starting your own consulting business or buying a franchise, like you should be practicing what you're preaching. Otherwise, you're probably not in that good of a position to provide any good advice. So there's kind of this 2-week sprint at the beginning,
Right.
and that's where you're learning about them and helping them kind of lay out the roadmap to, all right, this is where you are today. These are the things that you need to get into place before you can kind of comfortably transition into your own consulting business.
It's like a third transition plan, a third entrepreneurial plan, and a third financial plan, right? So
Okay.
I'm projecting what that period, 1 year out, 5 years out, and all the way out. So I've actually developed I call it a time freedom calculator. It's not your typical retirement calculator, which is just looking at the amounts of money you can accumulate. It's actually combining elements of that with money that you can work. I call it your whenever work, which is after that time freedom moment where you're like, I'm going to supplement with this consulting business or the franchise business or whatever it happens to be. So it's qualitative and quantitative at the same time. And because the people I work with do tend to be analytical as well. So they want to know, like they want to be comfortable with the numbers and the projection of the numbers. And, we talked about like prototyping ideas. Well, you can prototype them by doing them and trying them out, or you can just project them in the calculator and see, oh, actually, selling that property isn't going to be worth it. Or,
Yeah.
I could actually plan to make $0 in my first year. I'm going to fill the gap in my second year, and then I'm going to make a bunch more in the next year. Like, how does that look? Like, what is, you can be super conservative or aggressive and
Yeah.
try to do some sensitivity analysis on that.
That's super beneficial. You can run the same type of numbers if you're investigating a franchise, right? Because you've got
Yeah,
access
yeah.
to data of the financial performance of other franchisees already in the business. And there's always a bell curve, right? There's always top performers, underperformers, everything in between. So most good franchise brands are pretty good about having like a pro forma template kind of built out where you can take the data and input it. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell everyone, I'm like, you need to run at least 3 different financial models, one where you're kind of average, one where you're above average, one where you're below average, and run them for at least 3 years out, and that can be helpful. Now, I also am always very careful to remind people that, look, if you spend enough time in a spreadsheet or a calculator, you can kind of get it to spit out whatever you want it to. So
Yep.
be mindful of that, right? Like if you're really, really motivated to go get this business, like don't let that, even if it's subconsciously, impact some of these projections. Like we want to make sure we're being realistic and probably even conservative so that if it plays out differently, it's in your favor and not against you. But yeah, tools like that are really, really helpful. And I can see where, someone spending those 2 weeks with you and just, because you're giving them this in an organized manner, right? Like hey, this is what we need to look at first, and then this, and then this, because
Yeah.
I know that's where so many people get stuck, right? They're like, yeah, I know I'd be happier if I did this, but like I don't know where to start. So that's got to be hugely helpful. Is everyone that you're coaching, is their goal to transition into their own consulting business, or are you
No.
working with people that have other business ventures that they're considering starting? It's just managing that transition.
80% are looking to start something, right? Start their own business. Does not have to be consulting. I
Okay.
got into, I actually am the Choosy Consultant in
Yeah.
this case, because that's what enabled
Yeah.
me. That's what enabled me to make the jump.
Yep.
And consulting is such an easy one. But yeah, but actually, 20% of people are just looking for ways to just take more time back in their life. So it might actually even
Oh,
be staying in a W-2 position, but
okay.
changing the work that they do to be more of just a job where you maybe more of a maker versus a manager, where you can just do your deep work in your job and be happy with it, and then take the time back. But yeah, it's usually I that's the for me. I have a hard time of like thinking about things. I need to like see examples. So I've like been accumulating these different ways in which people can make this transition. You know, another like for example, another one would be I work with a CPA who's transitioning to seasonal work. So what do I mean by that? Instead of having a 5-person firm working year round, guess what? It's back down to me and an assistant, the CPA and assistant. I go all in during tax season and I take the rest of the year off.
Yeah.
You can, if you run the numbers, you're like, wow, I'm super happy. It's much less stressful. I'm able to then spend that other time doing this other passion project that I have.
Yep.
It's a charity in this case. It's just, everyone's a little bit different, but like I'm working on a book, and I'm part of it is like laying out all these different ways you can do it, because I've, at least personally, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I never thought about doing it that way, and so I'm kind of accumulating these as I work with people.
Yeah. It's, I'm kind of the same, right? Like if I can see examples, it
Yeah.
sticks with me a lot better than just hearing it or even reading it. And, I talk about this all the time, on this show, and it's why I like to have people like you and other entrepreneurs that are not in the franchising space at all, because franchising can be a great way for a lot of people, but it's not going to be right for everyone. It may not be the best way for everyone, and there's just so many different ways that you can go, and it is a very personalized thing. Like my general process that I take someone through is pretty similar, right? In terms of the steps that we work through together
Mm-hmm.
to get me to a point where, well, really first to get them to a point where they understand the concept of franchise ownership enough to say, okay, yeah, I think this is something that really could make sense for me. Now it's just a matter of finding the right franchise business. And it's what gets me to the point of saying, okay, based on the work we've done together, here are some specific franchises that really line up with, everything that we've outlined together. But it's not, because like I get, people ask me all the time, like, what's the best franchise out there? I'm like, what's the best food out there?
Yeah.
Like everyone's getting, like, no one's, like, very few
Yep.
people are going to have like the exact same answer, right? They could even be like, well, it's pizza. And you'd be like, well, what kind of pizza? So it's just like that. There's so many, like everyone's different, and you've got to figure out the pathway that makes sense for you. But you can learn so much from observing what others have done, and you can take a little bit from this person and a little bit from this person. So yeah, I think the personalization, especially that time you spend with them in the beginning, is very valuable. Access to those group meetings is probably great too, because it's reinforcing that you're not crazy with these ideas. There's other people out there thinking about it the same way that you are, and you can brainstorm, and you kind of build this support network. So that's really cool. I'm curious, with the consulting, are there certain industries that, based on your experience, you feel lend themselves better to people that have worked as a W-2 employee in a certain industry? Maybe it's easier to transition into consulting. I'm thinking, IT maybe, or something along those lines.
Certainly IT, although I would say not necessarily the industry, but a lot of it comes down to the how the place that you work. So quit and contract back is one of my strategies, which is, just stop working and consult back for the company. But if that company never uses consultants or contractors, that's not going to work very well. So you kind of have to assess, if you're working with, for me, it was in a company in healthcare, and I did project management. So, of IT projects. So yeah, certainly that would definitely be a fit. But, and it was a good sized company that uses a lot of consultants and contractors. I had consulted as a staff consultant at another place, and they didn't have a huge budget for that stuff. So it probably wouldn't work. So, I'm not giving you a great answer, but it kind of comes down to the particular situation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. In this day and age with social media, like it's in a lot of ways, it's never been easier to go out on your own and start a business. I mean, you can market yourself through social media and YouTube and things like that pretty inexpensively. It's not expensive to have a great website built. You've got things like QuickBooks, and I mean, all the tools that you really need to run a business relatively inexpensively. But on the flip side of that, there's also a lot of people doing it, and there's a lot of freaking noise out there. So what's your thought on, like, is it easier than ever to transition out on your own, or is it in some ways becoming more difficult just because there is so much noise out there to cut through?
Like, my view on this is that it comes back to, can you provide something of value that somebody will buy? So let me give you an example. I know a woman who was going through classes to become a licensed therapist, and was working with the Head Start organization, right? Big federal organization all over the place. She, again, like, you just have to be aware and kind of open-minded. She was coming from an IT project management background, kind of unique. She started working with the Head Start group and realized that they needed to prepare these analytical reports and submit them quarterly. Everyone in Head Start hated doing it because they just wanted to work with the kids. And so all of a sudden, they're like, please, please, please do this for me. It's required by the federal law. Nobody here wants to do it. We'll pay you whatever to do these for us. And there's also all these Head Starts all over the country. Well, all of a sudden you have a situation where what you have to offer is so valuable to them. And it's regulatorily required on top of that. So again, it so comes down to the particular situation, and do you have something of value to offer? Because then it's almost like they're begging you to have a business and offer that to you. So, could just to go out and say, I'm going to be a social media manager, or I'm going to be an independent, this or that. That's riskier to me, because you don't have anything drawing you, or you don't have a specific value added, out there. For me, it was people begging me, like, how did you do this? I want to know, teach me. I want to get there. Like, I can do this in 10 years. I'm like, well, looking at your numbers, you could probably do it in 3.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're going to save me 7 years of a job that I hate, working at a job that I hate. I will pay you whatever. Well, not whatever, but I'll pay you good money for that.
Yeah. I think you think about it the same way I do. I think I would have answered that question very similarly, which is like, look, if you have a good understanding of what it is you can offer, who's going to be willing to pay for it, and how to get in front of those people, you've probably got something you can run with. I think your example of, if you just want to be a social media content manager, good luck, right? Like, you can find people, right? But you're probably going to be in a race to the bottom in terms of what you can charge for that, right? So yeah, I think, having, as clear of a strategy as you can of, what exactly it is you're in a good position to offer, how you can add value, who's going to be your target audience, and then, good ideas of way to get in front of them. There's your example is interesting. There's a lady that I don't even know how it came about, right? But she used to have some sort of a marketing company, and then she started having kids, and didn't want to work full time and have employees and all of that. And she met one of the franchisees for one of the brands my wife and I own. And that franchisee asked her to start putting together like a monthly newsletter and emailing it out to her customer list or her database. And for whatever reason, the franchisor, just like most, has a marketing department and things like that. But this particular type of newsletter, and she's using like a MailChimp or one of these to send it out. And I think that was the thing, right? Was, we have an internal CRM system. And so the franchisor's marketing team won't work in outside CRM or, mail management system. So that's why she brought this other lady in. She had a idea that she'd wanted to try in terms of like remarketing to past clients or leads in the database. Well, fast forward a couple of years, this lady does that newsletter for like 75% of the franchisees. And it's one newsletter. It's the same damn newsletter for every single one. All she does is go in and customize, like the name, like Shelf Genie of blank, whatever market. And then she does, go into each franchisee's, whether it's MailChimp or whatever system, and, make sure it's in there, it's scheduled, whatever. But it's not a huge amount of work. And I mean, she's making pretty good money, especially given the amount of time that she has to put into it. And a lot of it's no knock on her. She's brilliant, but a lot of it's like mindless work, right? It's like copying and pasting the same template into, like, she could probably, and she may do this already, have a VA, offshore for like $10 an hour that's doing all of that. And all she's really doing is like 2-3 hours of work a month. She got this email going out for 60 plus franchisees, probably, $500 a pop. That's a pretty good little gig.
That's 4-hour work week.
You see stuff like that all the time, right? But to one of your points from way earlier, she saw an opportunity and she took it. She said, "Look, I could, use this as a way to, kind of turn it into something a little bit bigger once she understood this was a franchise and other people had the same need. Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
And one of the exercises I do with clients is I call it, what's your enthusiastic edge, which basically means, where do you have an edge? Like, I'm a realtor in Phoenix and I know that market inside and out. Right. And then, what work is like play for you? Like, where are you super enthusiastic? And if you can kind of combine those two things, I mean, you're going to be successful,
Yeah, 100%. Because you're always going to have bad days. And if you're in a business that you do enjoy and it's something that taps into your passions and your interests, like it's just so much easier to push through the bad days. I mean, I go through the exact same with my clients, and mine are not even really clients because they're not paying me, right? The franchise company pays me if and when I introduce them to someone and it's a fit and they go and become a franchisee. But we go through a lot of the same because so many people get into a business that they like the product or the service, but they didn't spend enough time thinking about like, okay, what does my daily life need to look like in order for me to be successful as the owner of this business? And so if that doesn't mesh with their strengths, their interest, if it doesn't mesh with the type of lifestyle that they're looking for, like I get this one all the time. You'll probably chuckle given the types of conversations you have all the time. I'm talking to someone, they're like, hey, we were down in Florida for vacation last month. We ate at this restaurant. It was fantastic. We found out they're franchising and our area doesn't have anything like it. It'll do so well here. Therefore, we're going to open a restaurant. And I'm like, didn't you just tell me you were working 50 hours a week and you have 3 kids in middle school and you haven't been to one of their ball games in 2 years yet? You want to open a restaurant?
And you don't know anything about running a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's delicious. Though. Yeah.
But it's so good. Yeah. So anyways, I think that's an important piece, right? Is like figure out what you can do so that, as much as possible, it doesn't even feel like you're working.
Yep. So I talked about that time freedom equation earlier, which is, your expenses, your investment income, and your kind of your work whenever income. I have a quiz on my website. If you don't mind, I can share that. It's choosyconsultant.com/quiz. And because the main question I'll get is from people, can you accelerate my freedom? Right. And by answering this 12-question quiz, I can get a good sense for, how many years I could probably shave off of when you think you could be free. It's usually around, from my personal experience, 3 to 10 years I can usually take off, but everyone's got their own individual situation. So that's just a good kind of initial tool. And if you ever want to talk to me to see if we do want to work together, that quiz gives me so much information and we can kind of have a really, really helpful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tool. And I think a great way for, someone to kind of get the discussion started with you. So we'll make sure that link is in the show notes. Anywhere else you'd like to point people where that sounds like a really good starting point for anyone that's, wants to learn more and potentially have a conversation with you. Social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, anything else you want to make people aware of?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn because that's typically where my
Yeah.
where the people I work with are coming from. But
Yeah.
that I have links to all that from my website, which is choosyconsultant.com. So you can find everything there.
Excellent, man. Well, Brian, this has been really interesting. It's such a cool concept, and I love that you're helping other people navigate, how to transition into business for themselves, as they pursue more freedom, financial and time freedom in their own lives. I love that you're, walking the walk yourself. So keep up the great work, and thank you so much for dropping in here on the Path to Freedom podcast.
Thanks, Wes. It's been a true pleasure.